Hello, beautiful people. Oh, so nice to see you all. First off, welcome to San Francisco Public Library's 19th One City, One Book Special Edition. Yeah, give it up. 19 years of One City, One Book. That is a lot. So get ready for 20 coming up. But we have many programs and events lined up with One City, One Book. In your gift bag, you got a brochure that has all of the information about that. On the 6th floor, there is an exhibit of Maya Angelou and her connections to Glide Memorial. And we will be having an event on the 14th at the Tenderloin Museum with a film about Maya and Glide. So come check that out. Let's get two things out of the way. First off, a timely quote from Maya. You may encounter many defeats, but you must not be defeated. In fact, it may be necessary to encounter the defeats so you can know who you are, what you can rise from, and how you can still come out of it. And our land acknowledgements. I like to read the land acknowledgement for the elementary age school children because I think it's just beautiful and it hits harder. We acknowledge that the land we're gathered on today is traditional land of the Ramaytush Ohlone people. We must give thanks and respect to the Ohlone people by taking care of the earth, the animals, and one another. We acknowledge that we, as non-Ohlone residents, we are guests on this occupied land, and we are grateful for the opportunity to live, learn, and play here. As all of us here together, let's collectively uplift and respect the Ohlone people, their history, their work, one another, and love each other and be kind. With that, I also want to thank the amazing people that work at this library, and not just the beautiful faces, but our behind-the-scenes crew, our custodials, our security, our amazing media services who are the backbone of this place. And now, we are all here for the amazing group of women artists who are doing amazing things, and I hope you all walked in from Larkin Street and saw the beautiful Maya sculpture. I feel graced every day to be able to see that. Today's panel features Lava Thomas, Mildred Howard, and Cheryl Derricotte, three accomplished artists. Yeah, give it up, woo! And today's moderator is Bay Area KQED, Sarah Hotchkiss, artist and arts writer. Please give a warm welcome for our panel.
Hello, everyone. I'm Sarah Hotchkiss. Can you hear me through the mask? We're good? I unfortunately picked up a cold. I blame covering election night, so thank you for that. I wanted to thank you all for being here. I know that this week is a really tough week for a lot of us, and it's left many of us feeling like we want to retreat, to curl into a ball, stay home, and hide. And I thank you for braving the outside world and being with us here tonight. It is really wonderful to see so many faces come out for public art, for these extraordinary artists. And I'm thrilled to be introducing our panelists for Women in Public Art tonight. So I'll start with the first artist on my left, Lava Thomas, whose incredible monument to Maya Angelou you probably passed on your way in, and if you didn't, you should check it on your way out. She's an artist whose work addresses race, gender, representation, and memorialization. Her practice includes drawing, painting, photography, sculpture, and installations, and now a giant bronze sculpture. She's received numerous awards, including the Artadia Award and the Lucas Artist Fellowship at the Montalvo Arts Center, and her work has been exhibited nationwide in institutions such as the National Portrait Gallery, the Smithsonian Museum, and the California African American Museum. All right, Cheryl Derricotte, in the middle, is a visual artist whose favorite medium is glass, though she also makes work with paper and textiles. I most recently saw Cheryl's work at CALA in Berkeley, where she's part of the exhibition Roadwork, which is the culmination of her residency with the City of Berkeley's Pilot Climate Equity Action Fund. In 2021, she received the commission to create a monument to Harriet Tubman at the gateway at Millbrae Station, which is the first sculptural tribute to the abolitionist made in glass. Freedom's Threshold, which is the name of that piece, was unveiled last year in 2023. Her work is in the collections of the Museum of Glass, the DeYoung Museum, the Oakland Museum, and the very own San Francisco Public Library, among many others. Cheryl is also a licensed city planner, which I'm sure we'll get into. And last but not least, Mildred Howard is a legendary Bay Area artist known for her sculptural installations and mixed media assemblages. Most recently, she created a project so large that it had to be shared across 3 institutions: 500 Cap Street, Part 2 Gallery in Oakland, and Anglem Trimble in San Francisco. It was called Collaborating with the Muses, Part 1, and I know there's more parts to come. Influenced by her parents' activism in civil rights and labor unions, she began her career as a dancer in the 1980s before transitioning into visual art. Her public art graces buildings and locations around the Bay, and we'll get into a number of those tonight. She is shown in museums across the US, including SF MoMA and the DeYoung Museum, and her work is in the permanent collections of places like the Oakland Museum and the DeRosa. Okay, so now I've made it to the end of my intros. Okay, there's so much more that I could say about all 3 of our panelists, but I think we want to not hear me talk so much and just hear them talk about themselves and their work, so we're going to get into it. We're here to talk about public art in a city that recently mandated that 30% of its public art and street names honor women. Lava's Maya Angelou monument is an important step towards that 30%, but we have an incredibly long way to go. You're all at different stages and your journeys as public artists. Mildred is a seasoned professional. Cheryl, you have a few projects under your belt, and this was your very first public art piece, Lava. I was wondering if you could each take me back to your first piece, not so long ago for you, and tell me how you made that transition into permanent artworks in the public sphere. Mildred, will you kick us off with that? What was your first, or one of your first pieces?
I think my first piece was San Francisco International Airport. But first of all, I'd just like to thank the library for inviting us when it's not Black History Month. And in addition, the library is one of the most democratic institutions in the country. It's free and open to the public, and anyone can come. My first, I think it was, I can't remember if it was the airport or the Blue Bridge. I think it was the San Francisco airport. And for that one, that was a good lesson. It's the one, the salty peanuts. And when I did that one, I had submitted a proposal where I wanted to do a pile of suitcases as if because I see order within chaos. If I had, say, 1,000 suitcases and you threw them up and let them fall within a given space and then cut them off, cast them in bronze, and put them on a wall. But for some reason, they didn't want that to happen. So they didn't want that piece, but they liked the concept. So I was listening to Dizzy Gillespie playing Salt Peanuts. But I knew if they didn't want suitcases, they didn't want trumpets. So I went for saxophones. So that was my very first piece. I think the budget was really low, like $210,000. Is anyone from the Art Commission here? Maybe 210,000 at that time for that piece.
2001, I think, was that piece. Yeah. Cheryl, what was your first public artwork?
My first public artwork was a billboard called Living on the Fence Line, and it was part of a 3-city billboard show curated by a nonprofit, Save Art Space. And the 2 guest curators, some of you will know their names, were Gianni Lee and Swoon. And I remember getting an email on New Year's Eve in the middle of the pandemic saying, "You're in, and we're going to go with your billboard." And I was so excited. And then the next sentence said, "And you're going to be in LA with Gianni Lee and the great Judy Chicago." I was like winning somehow in this pandemic, winning. And so my billboard, Judy Chicago's billboard, and Gianni Lee's billboard were all up in LA February 1st through 28th in 2021. And the title of the Tri-City show, Whistling in the Dark, was a commentary on all of our work with the environmental crisis, work that is still vital today.
How did you come to be responsible for the one right out here?
First, I'd like to thank the library and everyone for being here. And I want to first acknowledge the elephant in the room. We are all reeling from this election. So I am sending everyone an energetic hug and receiving them from all of you. We're here together, and this is a wonderful place to be right now. So most of you know the story about my first public art project. 5 years ago, the city of San Francisco decided to rectify the gender imbalance in public art and named Dr. Maya Angelou as the first woman of color to be honored, and I wasn't invited to apply. My design was not in the neoclassical tradition, so some of the politicians weren't happy about that, and my selection was rejected. But after about 1.5 years of letter writing, community activism, really from folks around the country, because it happened during the pandemic where we could all join the Visual Art Committee meetings via Zoom, which wasn't possible before the pandemic. So there was an outpouring of support, outpouring of outrage, and my selection was reinstated. Getting it done, though, was challenging because, as I said, it was the pandemic then, and the price of bronze and other materials went up, really skyrocketed. And so, Mildred, when you said that your first project had a low budget, the budget for the Maya Angelou project was really, really low. And the foundry that I originally wanted to work with, who was local, couldn't do it within the budget. Fortunately, the budget was raised. I worked with a wonderful foundry in Walla Walla, Washington, and today, well, 2 months prior, 5 years since I was first selected, Portrait of a Phenomenal Woman, a monument to honor Dr. Maya Angelou, now proudly stands in front of the library.
Yes, we're so lucky.
There's one more thing I'd like to say, because there are folks here who were really instrumental in helping. Those of you in the audience that supported me, I thank you. Mildred, thank you. Trish, thank you. Thank you. Because it wouldn't have happened, thank you. It wouldn't have happened without all of you. And I did not walk this path alone, and I'm incredibly grateful.
Thank you, Lava. I mean, what you're saying is a very unusual turn of events, not the way it's supposed to go with public art, but it gets at something that I think that the public doesn't always understand, which is the pace and the scale of public art. These are projects that can take years, sometimes even up to a decade, from start to finish. And it's a very different time frame from an individual artist preparing for a solo gallery show, which you might do over the course of a year or maybe 2. And I was wondering, for all 3 of you, what is something about working in public art that surprised you in terms of either the pace, the scale, or the number of stakeholders involved that was just very different from your individual art practices. Cheryl, do you want to start with this one?
Sure. Well, I'll take this one from Freedom's Threshold, which is the monument to Harriet Tubman. And quite honestly, from everything I heard, I got off cheap. So Freedom's Threshold was actually commissioned by the private developer that made Gateway at Millbrae Station, which is a new transit-oriented development for those of you who hadn't been there. And so because of that, the pace of my project moved incredibly fast. So from start to finish, I think we were 2.5 years. I remember being invited to submit an LOI on the project like January. By March, there was a short list. I think by May, I had made a presentation. We went to contract a month later. And then it became the waiting as the larger project went through the actual permitting process to build a new town, basically. And then finally one day they were like, we're ready. And I was like, okay. And then they said, no, we're not. And I said, okay. And then the next time they're like, we're ready. And I was like, okay. And 6 months later, there we were. So it was installed in March of 2023. So about 2.5 years total.
And that stopping and starting is because you have to fit it into the larger building project.
Correct.
Yeah.
So, my art and the other art that are part of that, because they had 8 outdoor sculptures, had to wait until all the underground wiring and all the concrete and all of those approvals were ready to then install sculpture.
Right. Mildred, is there anything, you have a lot of stories, I'm sure. Is there one that you'd like to tell about a surprising thing that you learned about the process of making public art while you were doing it?
First of all, you have to have patience, and you can't do it alone, because the making of the work almost is the last stage. Before that, you have to submit a proposal. So for that, I know basics on a computer, but I don't know Photoshop. So I've been working with Magnolia Editions, and Tallulah Terrell is out there. She's worked on a lot of my boards with me. And that's the first thing, to present eye candy to the committee or the selection committee, and hoping that you've covered all your bases with good images, a good description, and separate from that, coming up with the budget, your team, and all of those kinds of things. And prior to that, I knew a little bit about it, but I learned so much working with various kinds of engineers, both civil and structural engineers, sometimes city planners, developers. And then, of course, there's the fabricators. You have to be able to observe and be around for all aspects, because it's your work and you want your interpretation. And if you can find a team that can meet all of those criteria, then it's a whole lot easier. It's still difficult, but easier.
Yeah, I made the mistake of referring to fabricators as collaborators in our pre-interview, and Mildred very firmly corrected me that they are not collaborators. It is the artist's vision that is being carried out by this team of professionals. Did you have any learnings from translating your work into this scale?
I learned so much throughout this project. I do want to talk a little bit about the contracting phase for me, because this was such a complicated situation. It was unusual. I really needed an attorney by the time my selection was approved. And then it took 8 months for my attorney and the city attorneys to come to a contract that I was willing to sign. The contracts for the city of San Francisco are almost 70 pages long, and they're written in legalese, and they're written really to protect the city leaving the artist at incredible financial risk. And so it's really important for those artists who are considering public art projects to first hire a really good arts attorney to negotiate your contract for you, because it's not just the contract between the city, you also have contracts with all of your subcontractors, your structural engineer, your fabricators, your project managers, your entire team who you have not hired yourself are under contract, and you have to make sure that you're legally protected and that they're legally protected, and that takes quite a long time. I'm accustomed to working with teams with exhibitions. For example, museum exhibitions, there's a curator, there's an exhibition designer, there's a registrar. I have studio assistants when I'm creating an exhibition usually, but this project was the first time that I worked with fabricators, structural engineers. I was working with in a material that I've never worked in before, and I wanted to translate a which I did, a two-dimensional drawing into a three-dimensional sculpture. So that drawing had to be scanned, and again, I worked with Magnolia Editions. Tallulah, thank you. And then after it was digitized, it was exported into 3D software at Walla Walla Foundry. And then I worked with the digital team there to design the actual monument in digital space first.
You've achieved something really extraordinary, which is that your own hand in that original drawing is transferred into the bronze. And you mentioned this when we spoke earlier, that they developed a new system. This was like new for the foundry. Yeah.
It was new for the foundry. They had never translated a drawing across a surface that was 8 foot tall and 6 foot wide. So doing that proposed some technical challenges for them, and we all worked together to solve those.
I wonder if, Cheryl and Mildred, do you have experiences of translating your own hand? How do you preserve that element of touch of your own artistic practice into these hard, metal, glass materials that aren't necessarily made by you explicitly?
Do you want me to go first, or you want to go first? Okay. So in my case, well, let me do the love to both. First, love to the library. And I do a lot with digital collections and public domain historical materials from libraries. And so let me give my own love to Magnolia, because I showed up with a very small, very old picture of Harriet Tubman and said, "Hi, we need to turn this into 12 feet, please." And Tallulah did, which was wonderful. And so for me, my hand is there because I make the glass. So the fabricator that I worked with, which is Eclipse Designs in Petaluma, made the aluminum frame that is 12 feet, and then the interior part that actually holds the glass. And then I cut and fired all of the glass.
Got it.
What was the question?
It was about your own hand and how that's preserved or translated when you fabricate in material that maybe you're not touching yourself. Oh, yeah.
With the piece that's up right now, my hand is all over the clay. Yeah. I mean, it's digitized because no longer do you have to hand build it. It's digitized, and then it's covered with clay, and then it's a mold is made and the wax.
So did you make a to-scale version of that?
All of those are about the like this bracelet size or a little bigger. And I have been collecting African currency, which is different than money, for years. And that's how I came up with using all of the promissory notes that I've done over the last 3 projects, except for one, which is the question mark. And with the question mark that's at the San Leandro Library, I went over that with my finger. All the clay is my fingerprint. And the form is a form that I had previously done at the Museum of Glass. So everything has my,
Literal fingerprints
yeah,
on
if it's not what I want, I don't want to do it. Even though it's for the public, I have to also like what I'm doing.
I'm shifting gears a little bit here, but I want to talk about representational monuments. And I think if you ask the average person on the street what a monument looks like, a lot of them would say that it's a man, a white man on horseback, because we've been trained over centuries of Western art and art history to see this as the only way to honor and memorialize an important person. But all 3 of you have done incredible work that isn't necessarily figurative, that isn't even always representational. And I want to ask you all why it is important to expand our understanding of what public art can look like. Who wants to start with this one? Lava, why don't you go first?
I have lots to say. I do want to make a correction because my work
please.
is representational.
Yes.
And figurative means that it looks like something. So my work isn't abstract, it's recognizably something, but it's not a statue of a figure. The public's preference for figurative statuary really comes from what they have been accustomed to seeing. And that comes out of a neoclassical European convention that most monuments in this country are based on. And those monuments glorify war, they glorify conquest, they glorify genocide, they uphold a white supremacist ideal. So now in 2024, we're looking at making public art more inclusive. It's not enough to create a black body in the neoclassical tradition because you're still privileging a European white ideal. So you really have to look at a more inclusive base for aesthetics. You have to look at other cultural traditions. You have to look at non-white artists. And the challenge is that the public doesn't have that background. They don't have that visual base because many of those don't exist yet. So education is extremely, extremely important. And it's also important that the selections are made by arts professionals that have those, that are on the forefront of thinking about inclusivity when you're thinking about aesthetics and different ways of picturing what monuments can look like. I always say that an artist's job is not to give the public what it wants, but to show the public what can be.
Well said.
It was really important for me to share a story about Harriet Tubman that most people didn't know. And I know it comes out of my interest overall in like real estate development and the day job stuff. But I was always struck by the fact that people either talked about her as the conductor of the Underground Railroad, and then 2 sentences later would say, and you know, it was so unfortunate that she died poor. And Harriet Tubman had 32 acres of property, 3 known buildings, her home, and also John Brown Hall, which was a hospital for formerly enslaved people, and then a retirement home for formerly enslaved people, and then a couple of other buildings like the barn, you know, what we'd call the garage by today's standards. And I just kept saying, if you have 32 acres of property, are you poor? You know, how do we think about wealth, particularly wealth in a Black context, mutual aid in that context, and how to really share that story. So it was important to me that it was a picture of her at her best. It was probably taken during one of her abolitionist talks, and she is framed by the side profile of her existing house to hopefully encourage people to really delve into that history and understand what a conversation about women and Black women and property ownership and the negotiation it took in the 1800s to own that kind of property, to buy that property, was just really important to me. And then I think also philanthropy, because she left that property to her local AME Zion Church. And I also think a conversation about Black and women's philanthropy is a conversation we still need to have.
When I'm making art, I'm not only thinking of public art, I'm thinking about the community in which the work will exist. And getting to know that community and understanding some of their feelings about where they live, I think is equally as important, because the work will live in their space, even though it's public. So those are some of the things I think about. But also, I want them to go beyond their community. I want them to look at work and to question, what is it? Why is it there? Why here? What is it used for? So that hopefully they will go and do research on their own. I mean, the other thing about showing in the public realm is that many years ago, I ran a program out in East Oakland. I think Lou Watts was taught photography there. He's sitting out there at the East Oakland Youth Development Center. And on one of those occasions, I said I want to take them to San Francisco to visit various sites. And here we are on 82nd and East 14th. The young kids had never been on BART, had never been downtown, had never gone to San Francisco, had never rode a cable car, much less visit a museum. And we did all of that and ended up at the San Francisco Art Institute. There are people like that who I want to look at my art and have them question what it is and take them on a different journey.
Yeah, it strikes me with all of your answers, it opens to have a piece that is not a man on a horse, which is not what any of us really need to honor at this point anymore. You open up so many different avenues for conversation through the form of the work, because it is different, because it stands out, because it is not a thing that we have become accustomed to seeing in our everyday landscape. And some of you have made work that is now part of the landscape. It's permanent, it's a fixture. Mildred especially, you know, the work has been there for decades. And how does it feel to see your work in these permanent formats, to reach broader audiences beyond museum and gallery goers? I mean, you spoke to that just a little bit now, but some of your work, like the Blue Bridge.
Oh,
yeah.
Goodness, is it up there?
It
I
might-
want you to see. Now, that's like tragic. I think that education about art should begin very early on with very young kids, so that it's respected and treated right. The Blue Bridge was commissioned by the Redevelopment Agency. And they came to me. They came to me to apply, and I ended up getting it. And I knew that I wanted to talk about the various communities in the Western edition. There's a Jewish community, the Japanese community, and the African American community. At one time it was. And so I wanted to address particularly those communities. And I had heard Quincy Troop on Bill Moyer. I didn't even know him. But I think I called up Ishmael Reed and I said, do you have his number? And I called him up and he said yes. And I told him that I wanted him to do a poem that you could read in any direction. And for me, the poem was almost like the cityscapes. You hear the cars, you hear the footprints, you know, your steps. And the blue is for the blues. Okay, this is how it looked when I did it. And if you go to the next slide, it's just like, take it down. The next one, that's how it looks now. So it's been shot at, been scribbled. It's just tragic. And there's no redevelopment agency. So that's it was great doing it, but it's sad looking at it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is like the long-term conservation of public art
Yes,
is a whole
yes,
other,
yes.
important conversation. But yeah,
Right.
it's like, how do you maintain things that are meant to be as permanent as possible, but may not last forever? Yeah. And the changing communities around
Yes.
them. Yeah. Cheryl, how does it feel to have your work in public space always, 24/7, the people are interacting with?
It's kind of surreal sometimes, because people will send me pictures, like their Mildred is the last stop before you get to San Francisco Airport, so a lot of times people will stop there. I think in terms of designing the work, you see the same image of Harriet Tubman, whether you're on the BART or whether you're coming from the buildings, and I think to that notion of community, that was important to me. I didn't really want there to be sort of the front or back of the monument. I wanted her accessible from both views. So I think it's still very much, a joy to me that people see it and interact with it and are enjoying it. And as I've watched over the past couple of years that more and more businesses now are beginning to fill out at Gateway at Millbrae Station, it's really nice that it's a high traffic area. And BART actually renamed the road Harriet Tubman Way. So that's also a really nice, companion piece of what went on. Because I think we all know Harriet Tubman didn't really come to California, but, but it was like sort of a joint initiative of the city of Millbrae, the San Mateo NAACP, and Republic Urban Properties, the developer, that they wanted to do this together with BART.
And I must say that I give a plug for the San Francisco Art Commission staff, because they are really great to work with. They really know the ins and outs of just all aspects of public art. Yeah. And I've worked with most of the people there.
Yeah, they're wonderful.
Yes.
They do what seemed like impossible work on the regular. Lava, you have had less time to have your work in the public sphere 24/7. Does it feel real to see it?
Yeah.
What about the Smithsonian? How public is that?
The Smithsonian is public.
That's very public,
with
yes.
millions of
Yes.
visitors annually. Yes, that was amazing. That was amazing, but the Smithsonian's exhibition schedule is such that artworks are rotated. If it's not a specific exhibition, artworks are rotated every 5 years. So it's not up permanently. In the case of Portrait of a Phenomenal Woman, it's only been 6 weeks. It's been an incredible 6 weeks, actually. I can't say enough about the Arts Commission and the huge party and programming that they organized for the unveiling. It's incredibly gratifying to see how folks are responding to the work, how folks are interacting with the work, and just how anticipated the work was, considering all of the challenges that I faced creating it. I would do it again.
That's great. Calling all public art commissioners. I'm glad that you would do it again. And it does, I came in through that entrance tonight, and it kind of felt like it had always been there. It fills a space in that courtyard that is just so right. And it was glowing in the sunset. So it was quite beautiful. I have a question about the skills that you've gained from working on public art, the skills in terms of working with public agencies or writing applications, or maybe it's even thinking at a scale that you didn't think at before. Cheryl, you are nodding as if you have an answer to this.
You know, I think what I learned a lot about was how to be a small piece of a really big project, because the art was very much the last piece of what was a 10 or 12-year journey by this development company to make a new town. And so for the most part, that went really smoothly. But in hindsight, I recognize there are a couple of places in the future that I would probably be more aggressive or more strident in terms of working with the construction team to make sure, some of the underlying pieces were in place. Because, we all had to think a lot about electrical transformers and what was powering the lighting that went along, and that's just the thing you learn, until that moment, even having worked, day jobs on the construction side of things, I had never put in an underground transformer. I had only put in above ground electrical transformers. So there's different waterproofing issues when you're underground, and that's just one of those things that you don't learn until you've done it, So if I ever do that again, I'll be like, what's the voltage on the transformer? Does it work underground?
You have that in your toolbox now, Mildred?
Read your contract. That's the other thing. Read your contract. Write down questions. Don't be afraid to ask questions of something you don't know. California Lawyers for the Arts is a great resource. I've worked with MJ Bogatin for years on my project and helping me to understand contracts. Read the contract. That's one of the most important things to do before you sign it.
Oh, always good advice for everyone in every moment. Have you gained a skill you didn't previously?
Oh my goodness. I learned so much. I learned so much on so many different levels, actually. I learned how to create a monument. This was my first one. Working with fabricators for the first time, working with digital folks. I learned how to use Photoshop and other digital drawing tools that I hadn't really learned before. So that was important. I learned how to work with a team. I had a wonderful project manager. I really also learned how to advocate for myself in a major, major way. And each challenge that this project presented, I had to advocate for myself. So I was speaking about contracts earlier and the necessity of having an arts attorney. well, after I hired the arts attorney, I had to write a letter to the city so that I would be reimbursed for my legal expenses, because legal expenses were not part of my budget, or not an allowable part of my budget. So I learned, I could write a book about what I've learned on this project. And each challenge really was an opportunity for learning and growth for me.
You know, I don't really think about my work as monuments. I think about it as more as sculpture in the public realm. I mean, I guess you could say it's synonymous, but I don't think about them as monuments.
Even like the locks and keys for Harry Bridges.
Well, that's a maybe that could be a monument.
That could be the one.
That could be. It could be.
I don't know
That's an interesting one, because when I did that, the street was, no one used the street.
It's still very rarely. Does everyone know this piece? If you've ever gone in the staff entrance of the Contemporary Jewish Museum,
Yeah.
you
and
would see this.
the entry to the Four Seasons.
Yeah, yeah. I'm less at the Four Seasons.
That was a private developer who did that. And they came back to me, 10 years later, to redo the street. And I worked for about 4 or 5 years on developing a new design for the entire street. And initially, the keys were going to be taken up, and I wanted them to sell the keys and give the money to nonprofits because I wanted to redo the streets. But then they sold the property. So now, but things like that happen.
Yeah. Yeah, the long tail.
And some have gotten stolen. I got a call once from a guy. It says, "Did you do a key? Your name is on this key." He found it at the beach.
What?
On the beach.
Did it get
It's
back
bronze.
Did it get back to the
I said
scene?
it belongs to, I told him who it belongs to. Yes, I did it, but I guess he has it in his living room. I have
my
no
God.
idea.
We have to
the
repatriate
beach.
that art. These are giant locks and keys. Hundreds of pounds, likely. I have a question here about if there are any artists in the audience who are thinking of getting into public art. What is the advice that you would offer them at this point in their career before they've received a commission, when they're still applying?
Find a mentor. Throughout the process of creating the monument to honor Dr. Maya Angelou, or even before, Mildred has been an incredible mentor to me in this project, and her career has really opened the door for so many of us to walk through, and has made it much, well, I can't say it made it easier for me, because it was very challenging. But find a mentor, ask a lot of questions, find other artists who have been working in the field for a while, find out what their experiences have been, and then start finding a team, I would say, even before you even begin to create your proposal, or before you answer a request for qualifications, because the team is the key.
Hire a project manager. The project manager, you can get the project manager to say things you can't say.
Ah, yes.
Yeah.
I use my editor for that. What about you, Cheryl?
I think, I would encourage artists always to have a tight proposal game. And I actually do a lot of proposals. I always tell other artists, you want to get that proposal muscle so flexed that doing 36 proposals a year is easy, and keep bumping it up, because ultimately this is a numbers game. And I feel that way no matter what it is, whether you're trying to get your work in a show or you're trying to get a residency. And public art in particular is very much a numbers game. And I think as the projects get bigger, particularly $1 million or over, you're competing with architecture firms. So you need to know that going into the gate. So you constantly have to strengthen your proposal game. And then I would agree with the notion of mentors. You know, I'm originally from Washington, D.C., so I'm very fortunate to have the mentorship of people that came out of Washington Glass, specifically Thurman Statham, Tim Tate. So I benefited from their knowledge around public art.
You told me something interesting when we spoke before this about how you can only get yourself so far, and then it depends on what someone had for lunch.
Yes. So two of my mentors always remind me, in a nutshell, they say, Cheryl, you know, the strength of your CV and your portfolio can get you to the finals. And then when you get to that final review committee, humans are in the room. And sometimes somebody didn't have a good breakfast. Sometimes somebody thinks the boy is cuter than you. You wore the blue shirt when you should have worn the black shirt. And you didn't know it, but actually somebody's cousin was in the finals with you. So, you know, they constantly sort of keep me in check about the process at the end. And, you know, the humans are humaning.
Yeah. I want to ask you all about your dream project. If you could receive the commission to create a piece of public art in a specific place or on a specific theme, what would it be? I didn't put this in my pre-interview list of questions, so they're on the spot right now.
That was a surprise.
It doesn't have to be in San Francisco either.
Well, if it doesn't have to be in San Francisco and we had all the money in the world,
Yes.
I think that I would want to do something in Venice or Murano that really honors the African trade around glass and sort of bring that history to the forefront.
Sounds amazing.
I'd have to agree with you that that would be something that I would want to do also.
Yeah. Specifically glass in Murano and Venice.
Whatever. I
Yeah.
don't know what the project would be, but to take it outside of the United States.
Yeah, yeah.
And something, and a venue. I mean, I've had exhibitions in other parts of the world, but everyone goes to the Biennale.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
I don't know where this would be in this country, but it needs to be in the United States. I don't know what material it would be made of, but it would be big. And it would be not a single piece of sculpture or a monument, but a gathering place, a healing place, a place where people come together who have different views, but who have civil discourse, a place where we listen to each other, a place that has circular benches, a place that has poetry, a place that has performances, a place that has singing, a place where disagreements are discussed, a place where agreements happen, a place where there's lots of love and hugging. And when people walk away, they may not be convinced of the other person's views, but it's a place where we see each other's humanity. That's my dream project.
Oh, yeah, definitely claps. I think it's so important to respond to calls for proposals with letters of interest, but those are all so constrained often by the circumstances of what the public art, where the funding is coming from, what it's going to be attached to. And I think putting those visions into the world, maybe we get closer to manifesting them. So My final question before we open it up to Q&A is where can people see your work right now, or what do you have coming up next that we should know about?
I have Rest coming up next.
Excellent.
And, well, I don't know if there's if the Art Commission has a map of all the public art. I'll give you a few. Stevenson Street at 3rd. Let's see. Then there's Mason Street, the Glide Affordable Housing. The San Leandro Public Library, the main branch. Let's see, where else? Oh, of course, the Concourse A of the International Airport. Of course, the Blue Bridge, but don't go see it. It's just so messed up. I think, is that it in San Francisco? Oh, Hunters Point. There are two pieces, thank you. There are two pieces at Hunters Point. The bracelets and the frame.
The frame is so beautiful.
Yeah. That was a funny story in doing that. I was looking at a piece on my wall, an older piece that had that frame, and that's how I came up with that idea. And of course, I went to Magnolia Editions and I said, how can you make this big?
Magnolia is the silent
Yes,
partner of this
yeah.
talk tonight.
It's the place to go if you want to get it done.
You guys have seen that one scroll through, right? It frames a view of the bay. What about you, Cheryl?
So right now, as Sarah mentioned, I'm in a 2-person show at Kala Art Institute with Marcel Pardo, Aritza. It is the culmination of 20 months of being municipal artist in residence for the city of Berkeley. And even though it's way ahead, I invite everybody to our final talk, which will be February 13th from 6 to 8 p.m. at Kala in Berkeley. And then, you know, I'm always in the hunt. So I'm a finalist on 4 public art projects right now. I'm calling in 2 somewhere in the United States of America. Stay tuned. And I'm working on a temporary public art project in East Palo Alto. So hopefully that will be up by the middle of December.
Excellent. What about you, Lava?
If someone advances the slides, I have a list at the very end.
They might just be on their
But
scroll.
we're at the beginning, so never mind. I have a piece that's in a group show at the Cantor Art Center at Stanford University. The name of the exhibition is Dwelling, and it is their new acquisitions exhibition. I have a piece that is in the National Museum of African American History and Culture, and it's been there for quite a while, thanks to the generous gift of Charles and Cheryl Ward. Hello. And I have a piece on view at Apple headquarters in Culver City, and then another large installation, tambourine installation at Hall Arts Hotel in Dallas, Texas. What's up next for me? Rest, and really looking forward to being back in the studio and making new work and having the time and space to create and think without major monument deadlines.
Excellent. Do we have anyone who would like to ask questions of this illustrious panel? There is a microphone.
All right. Good evening, one and all, and thank you all for being here. This is awesome. I'm so grateful I came tonight. I was wondering, you already shared some of your dream piece, but I was curious if you had your choice to offer something to the series that Lava, your piece is a part of. Who would you honor, or what would you honor here in San Francisco?
Love that, and that's an easy one for me, the great Mary Ellen Pleasant. Yeah. I'm ready to do the monument to Mary Ellen Pleasant in San Francisco.
That was the setup.
That's my brother, Julian. Thank you.
We're going to make that one happen too, manifesting.
So I have a question. I came a little late, I apologize, but memorials, do you have memorials or did I miss that?
What was the question?
Memorial sculptures that are more memorials than monuments, because I looked up the definition of monuments versus memorials, somebody who passed. So I guess the Rosie the Riveter, would that be considered a memorial? That's my question.
I think it's all of that. I think I was on that selection committee. I think it's both a memorial and a tribute. I think one of the great memorials is in Alabama. Do you know the memorial with the hanging pieces?
Oh, yeah, the lynching memorial.
The lynching memorial. That's a memorial. Oh, yes. I have one that I just did. Mabel's promissory note delivered. That's a piece that I did for my mother who sued BART and stopped it for 9 months so that it wouldn't go above ground in South Berkeley. South Berkeley was once, it was redlined. And they were going to Berkeley had voted to put BART underground from border to border. And she said, no, this is not going to happen. So she initiated a suit and pulled a team together. That was my mother, Ron Dellums. The engineer was T.Y. Lin, who was on her team, who built, his firm built the bridge. And she stopped BART for 9 months. And so it's underground in Berkeley. And my last piece was dedicated to her and put on the ground right in front of the BART station.
That's great. Yeah, that's it.
And that's the library.
Did you want to answer the question about monuments versus memorials?
I personally don't. Well, let me make sure I'm going to define it the same way you are, and you correct me if I'm wrong. In terms of like memorial, in my mind, suggests like Vietnam Memorial, something to commemorate a significant event or multiple people. So no, I don't have a memorial in my practice. Freedom's threshold is one person, Harriet Tubman, so very much a monument. But, to our earlier conversation, have I bid for memorial? Absolutely, because, if there's a proposal out there, I'm going to try it. I actually went for a memorial last year, which the great Hank Willis Thomas got. But, when I saw Hank got it, I was like, Cheryl, you made it to like the short list of 12 on a $6 million project. So, you just have to stay in the game.
And just because you don't get something, it doesn't mean it's not good. You just didn't get it.
That's true.
The piece that I created that ended up at the Smithsonian was definitely a memorial. It was a piece that paid tribute to the 9 men and women who were killed by a white supremacist at AME Church in South Carolina. The piece that's now standing in front of the library is a monument.
So I wanted to ask earlier, Mildred, you talked about the importance of bringing art education to especially young children and how much that, how crucial that is. And I'm wondering, as someone who, I grew up, in the public school system, and I grew up in very rural Michigan, and our art department was cut from the time that I was, I think, in kindergarten until when I was like a junior in high school. So I think that would have been a very crucial thing. So as public artists, people who make art, that is very much more accessible to the average person, do you have any specific kind of ideal interaction or setting or way to expose people to art that you wish that would kind of naturally come across in your practice, or how public art is kind of created from a foundational point? I guess ultimately I'm just kind of asking, how do you want your art to be perceived in in an educational way, especially to younger audiences?
I think my work will function in the way that I want. It's standing in front of the library. It is in the form of a book. The plaque explicitly states what my influences are. So the material that I chose, bronze, we think of that as being a typical monument material, but my choice is based on the Benin bronze plaques of West Africa. The book form is because my Angelou was a writer, but the plaque also says that it also highlights the significance of Black literary achievement when you consider the context of anti-literacy laws in the United States historically that made reading and writing a crime for both free and enslaved Black people. So my work stands in front of the halls of knowledge and also faces the halls of power, and it's easy to understand. So children can appreciate not only it, but its meaning, the meaning behind it, and adults can appreciate it as well.
This current temporary public art project that I'm working on in East Palo Alto is the first time that I directly had input by children. And it was actually last night. And it was fascinating because to design, it's a temporary fence that's going to go around a construction site. There's a new center for economic mobility being built in East Palo Alto. And so with the adult stakeholders, you know, I had a set of questions to sort of elicit their thoughts about what economic mobility meant and how that had sort of played itself out through the generations. And then suddenly I was presented with 10 to 15-year-olds, you know, who attend creative youth development classes at Epicenter. And so I had to reframe how we had that dialogue to get at some of the same issues. And I think, you know, it will both enrich the artwork to have that direct perspective. And I think it was also a good exchange for both of us because I don't often engage children that young in my work. More so it's community engagement with adults.
In my art career, I've taught on all levels with young people. And I found that children are just automatically curious. And they look at something with their eyes wide open. And having them just ask questions is the best thing, because then the parent has to be engaged. So having them ask questions about what is that, or why is that there, or how come it's out of this material, or what is the material?
Which is also why it's so important to have this mandate in San Francisco to increase the opportunities for those moments of curiosity and confrontation where you get the questions. Not a replacement, obviously, for arts in school, which we should have both in a perfect world, but great question.
I was just wondering, thinking about the times when I've applied for projects, and when you don't get them, sometimes the good thing about that is you have to articulate ideas that then lead to other work. That's what's happened with me. So I'm just wondering that sometimes you certainly want to get it, but sometimes there's rewards that are above that possibility. So I know that's probably been your experience. Maybe less so, because you all get all the ones you apply for.
Not really.
No.
Not really. But you know, just because you didn't get it, there are other people who are sitting on the panel who see your work. That's right. They see your work, and it may come up in some other kind of way.
The project that I'm working on in East Palo Alto, I got because the art consultant saw my work for an application I did to a call she put out, and I didn't get that, which was a new building on Mission Street. But she said, there's another project, it's a little smaller, I think you're the right artist for. And so she came out and did a studio visit. So yeah, putting yourself out there, sometimes you don't get what you want, but you get something nice anyway.
Okay, we have time for two more.
Good night. First, thank you for do our cities better, more lovely. And my question is thinking in community. Maybe could you consider doing a piece between all of you?
Would you ever collaborate, all
The
three
three.
of you?
Three of you.
Never thought about that.
I think it would be interesting if there's funding. Because somebody over here wants to make something big.
So earlier, you were asked where you could see the work, and all three artists have galleries at the Minnesota Street Project. Mildred has 2 gorgeous glass houses up in the atrium. It's free. The dealers are there. Lava is going to have an incredible piece up in our next show, beautifully, unbelievably done of her ancestors from an early photo album. It brought me to tears seeing it. All the dealers are there. We're all ready to talk to you. We have catalogs. We have everything that you might want to learn more about all these artists. And Cheryl is with Riddle. So I hope we'll see one and all there.
Thank you, Trish.
Thank you for that.
Thank
Wow,
you.
I ended on the
was
the best person, I think, here to end on.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you to the panelists for being part of this. It's been an amazing conversation.
Any final thoughts at all, please?
Yeah. No, I just want to say thank you so much again to San Francisco Public Library for bringing us together. Thank you all for coming out. And, you know, community is everything now more than ever. So thank you all. So delighted to be in conversation with the three of you.
Now, more than ever.
And I want to thank Sarah Hotchkiss, everyone, for being the great moderator. Most of all, I want to thank you all for being out here tonight. And if you didn't get your gift bag, get it on the way out. And we thank you for being part of One City, One Book. Thank you. Be safe, be kind, be loving.